Inside our warm rooms today, heaters hum, blankets rise thick, and comfort still feels thin. Out on the old plains, warmth moved differently. The fire sank to a faint red glow. The ground froze hard as hammered stone, and the cold did not fall from the sky. It crawled from the earth. Most people today would panic when the last ember fades. They did not. They watched the air. They listened to the ground. They trusted the heat they carried inside the body. A system built from discipline, not flame, from breath, not fuel, from heat held, not heat made. So the question returns quiet but sharp. Why did native families rely on body heat when the fire died, and why did it work? When the fire fades, the cold rises from the earth, slow at first, then quicker than the hide can stop it. Out on the plains, people learned that ground cold does not wait. It crawls, it climbs, it steals heat from the body before the mind even feels the loss. Most beginners make the same mistake. They lie down cold, and a cold body on frozen ground loses the night before it begins. The plains families understood that rhythm. They watched the embers, they felt the air settle, and they warmed the core before sleep. Not the skin, the core. They sat close to the final glow. Not enough to sweat, just enough to let the heat sink deep past the surface into muscle and breath. A quiet charge. Heat held, not heat made. That stored warmth lasts 30 to 40 minutes in full silence, long enough for breathing to steady, long enough for the heart to claim the night instead of losing it. On the plains, that window mattered. The first half hour meant survival. After that, the ground's pull slowed, the hide settled, and the body could keep its own fire alive. It was never about comfort. Comfort is a luxury. Warmth is discipline. This was preparation, the oldest winter rule. A rule carved from observation patience and nights when the wind never stopped. Modern winter climbers still follow it. Start warm or lose the night. The plains people learned it the hard way, and they passed it on, not as advice, but as fact. The cold does not forgive a cold start. When night settles, the cold moves upward from the ground. Slow at first, then sharp. A body lying on frozen soil loses heat faster than breath can replace it. That loss starts at the core. A cold core means a lost night, and a hide alone cannot warm the chest or the hips. Not when the fire is gone, not when the earth pulls steady and silent. The plains families learned that the body needed a starter heat, a quiet reservoir. So they used small riverstones, stones warmed beside the final embers, stones that carried the memory of fire. Warm the stones near the fading glow, not in the flame, in the low red edges where heat sinks slow. Pull them out before they shine. Wrap them in thin hide. Place one near the hips, one near the chest, close enough for warmth to drift like breath, never against bare skin. That pocket of heat lasted 60 to 90 minutes, long enough for the core to rise, long enough for the hides to seal, long enough for the heart to claim the night instead of losing it. A small stone, a longer night. This was not comfort. Comfort burns quick. This was discipline, a method carved from frost and patience. Arctic peoples used the same system. The Inuit warmed small stones to jumpstart the core before sleep. Different land, same cold, same logic. When the fire dies, the ground takes the heat first. It always does. The earth eats warmth the way frost eats breath. Slow, inevitable. A hide on frozen soil still loses nearly half its heat. The cold rises through the floor, through the grass, through the body. No one sleeps long when warmth escapes from below. So the plains families warmed the floor itself, not the air, not the skin, the ground. Archaeologists at Mandan and Hidatsa sites found large riverstones buried in ash pits, stones cracked open by years of heating and cooling. A full floor system, a radiant bed. Place large stones in the shallow pit near the fire. Let them heat for hours, not glowing, just heavy with stored warmth. Push them into a hollow, cover with ash, then with grass, then with hide. a layered floor, a slow engine under the body. This foundation released heat for 4 to 6 hours. Not minutes, hours. Long enough for the ground to stop pulling. Long enough for the cold to slow. Long enough for a family to survive a frozen night without feeding the fire. It was not a flame. It was the memory of many flames. A floor charged with warmth. A bed built from patience. This was winter engineering, soft, silent, exact. The Sami used heated earth beds. So did Arctic reindeer herders. Different worlds, same solution. Stone remembers what fire forgets. One body loses heat fast. Faster than most people guess. Heat slips out into the dark, settles low across the hide, and disappears into the ground. But 3 bodies together do something different. They create weather, a small climate of their own. Sleeping alone wastes nearly half of the warmth a body can hold. The old Plains families learned that truth long before anyone called it science. They watched how breath moved, how the air thickened when people gathered close, how warmth stayed when bodies formed a shape the cold could not break. Their discovery was simple: a triangle, heads close, feet outward, a pattern shaped by survival, not comfort. They covered everyone with one large hide, heavy, quiet, pressed down against the earth to stop cross drafts. The edges sealed, the air inside slowed, and when air slows, heat settles. It stays low. It stays long. A small warm dome formed around them. Stable, calm, efficient. Not bright like fire, but steady like breath. People today might call it affection. It wasn't. It was geometry. The cold does not care about love, but it respects patterns. And the triangle was the pattern that held heat the longest. Modern military still trains the same rule: buddy heat sleeping. 2 or 3 soldiers forming one pocket of warmth in a world that wants to take it. The old Plains families already knew the logic. They did not burn harder. They shared smarter. Because in real winter, warmth is not owned. It is built between people. The cold under the back kills faster than the cold in the air. It rises slow, then it climbs into the bones. The ground does not rush. It drains, steady, patient. And hide laid on frozen soil still loses nearly half its heat through conduction. The old Plains families learned that lesson early. They watched how frost behaved, how warmth slipped downward, not sideways, how the earth swallowed heat the moment a body settled. So they lifted themselves away from its hunger. Archaeologists digging in Wyoming in 1962 and 1974 found the proof. Layers of woven willow mats, 3 to 5 centimeters thick, laid beneath old teepee floors. A small rise, a quiet barrier, a handmade pause between flesh and frozen ground. The discovery was simple: thin willow branches, cross-woven by hand, placed as the first layer, grass on top, hide above that, air trapped between every fiber, still, warm, alive. When air stays still, heat stays longer. Wyoming thermal tests showed it clearly: a 50% reduction in ground heat loss, half the warmth saved by a layer no heavier than a blanket of reeds. They didn't build comfort, they built resistance. A floor that worked with the fire, not against it. Warmth came from the earth, but only after they blocked its pull, only after they slowed the cold rising from below. The willow shield was not decoration, it was physics, ground logic, a quiet form of survival built from riverbanks and patience. Today we call it a ground insulation pad. They already built one centuries ago, and theirs never failed in silence. Fur is more than warmth, it is airflow, a quiet system of tiny tunnels holding heat or letting it go. The old Plains families understood that long before anyone named it science. They watched how breath moved through the fibers, how air crawled along the grain, how warmth stayed when the fur faced the right way and vanished when it didn't. Cold drafts come from one mistake: the wrong direction. Fur laid outward on a freezing night pulls warm air away from the skin. A slow leak, silent, sharp, enough to steal the night if left unchecked. But they watched, and they learned. On deep, cold nights, they turned the fur inward toward the body, letting the fibers trap warm air the way grass traps morning frost. Still, held, alive. When the cold turned damp, they reversed it. Fur outward, letting moisture drift away instead of settling in the hide. A simple rotation, a change in direction. But direction is everything in winter. At the Glenbow Museum, hides from 1912 to 1930 show the evidence. Wear marks leaning one way for dry, cold seasons, and leaning the other for wet, cold years. They weren't wearing hides. They were tuning them, like instruments built for weather. The payoff was balance, stable warmth, fewer heat swings, air moving slow enough to be controlled, warmth held long enough to survive. Modern technical fabrics use the same idea. One-direction fibers, heat trapped when needed, moisture pushed out when danger rises. The Plains families understood it without charts or numbers, because in real winter, warmth isn't just created, it is directed. Sweat is the enemy in winter, not the wind, not the dark. Moisture, a thin layer of water that steals heat 10 to 20 times faster than the air around it. Cold does its work through patience. Moisture helps it win. The old Plains families understood that rhythm well. They watched how warmth left the skin, how breath cooled when sweat rose, how frost formed on hides where moisture gathered. Even a small mistake could open the door for the cold to crawl in. So they practiced one rule: don't sweat before sleep, not even a little. They moved slow in the last hour. No rushing, no heavy work. They stayed back from the strong flame so their skin would not warm too fast. And when they worked through the day, they peeled off thick layers before moving. Better a cool start than a wet finish. Dry skin meant stable heat. Stable heat meant a steady night. And a steady night was survival. Heat held. Heat kept. Heat protected by discipline, not comfort. This wasn't caution. It was winter math. Moisture equals loss. Dry equals life. Every modern winter school teaches the same lesson. Mountaineers still repeat it. Soldiers still trust it. Cold experts live by it. But the Plains families learned it first, through nights when the frost crept low and breath turned heavy in the dark. In real winter, warmth is not gained. It is preserved. And preservation begins long before you lie down. Warmth didn't come from fire. It came from design, from air slowed, from heat trapped low against the earth, from stones that remembered the glow, from hides tuned to the direction of the cold. Nothing heavy, nothing wasted, just understanding. The Plains families knew that winter isn't beaten. It is managed, breath by breath, layer by layer, a system built from patience, not strength. They didn't chase heat. They held it. They shaped the air. They worked with the ground instead of fighting it. And in that quiet cooperation, warmth lasted longer than flame. The wisdom that saved them weighed nothing. It lived in observation, in rhythm, in the small choices made before darkness settled. Heat is not made, it is kept, and they kept it well. When the fire shrank to a dull red line, they did not fear the cold. The wind crawled outside, the earth breathed slow beneath them. But inside the Tipis, the system held, breath warming air, hides guiding flow, stone remembering heat, ground releasing what it saved. Warmth stayed not because the flame survived, but because the people understood heat itself. They worked with winter, not against it. And in that quiet balance, the night passed. Stay by the fire.